Hey guys, welcome back. So we're out here at our new hayfield, and no, this is actually not hay that you see behind me. It's nice and green, isn't it? But that is some warm season grasses and a bunch of other stuff. It's stuff that's actually considered weeds, and we haven't touched this field at all. It hasn't been touched since last fall. It did have corn in it last year, so it was around October, late October, that this was probably harvested last year, and it hasn't been touched since. So there's a bunch of corn stalks that's up on the ground underneath all this. You can't see it anymore, but this is just what nature has done. Nature has kind of taken over. This is the seeds that was in the soil, and it's all come up. But this is not good forage for animals. This is going to be considered a poor quality forage. These warm season grasses, it's more of like a switchgrass that's kind of grown up in here, and we don't want that in our hay. So today we're actually starting to work this hayfield so that we can actually plant it into hay. It's never been planted into hay, and that's what we're working towards. So we started off with the brush hog. We went around the edges and trying to clean up around the edges. The blackberries and the brush and the trees, you can see they want to keep growing into the field. Nature wants to keep taking this field back. And so we've kind of cleaned up around the edges with the brush hog, trying to knock that back a little bit. And then the next thing we're going to do is we really want to have, we don't want any of this in our hayfield. So we need to kill off all of these weeds, but instead of using a spray to kill them off, what we're going to do is we're just going to disc the field. So we're going to plow this field up with a disc, and we'll work this, and cutting that disc will cut through all of these weeds. It'll cut through all the roots. It'll mix them up. It'll dry out the soil, and it'll cause all of this vegetation to die off. We will plow it probably several times to make sure that it does die off, but that's what we're going to do. Instead of trying to spray chemicals, we're just going to work the field with the plow instead. So that's what we're going to be doing now. We're going to go ahead and get the plow out, the disc out. It's probably buried behind some equipment. Hadn't been used for a couple years, so we need to grease it up, and then we'll get out here and we'll start discing this field up. And by the end of the day, this should be a nice plowed field, and should be all nice and nice loose dirt, and everything is all you see when we're done. So we got the disc all hooked up now and greased up. I think it's ready to go. The hoses on the front up there, there's a couple bad hoses on here, and they are leaking fluid when you have the disc raised up in the air. So we're gonna go ahead and use it today the way that it is. We'll just have to go ahead and buy a couple new hoses and put on there before we run it next time. So this is an old International Harvester disc. It is a 12-foot wide disc, and it has some chisel harrow on the back here, and that's basically like a drag harrow on the back, I guess you could call it that. And that is to help smooth out everything after it discs it up. I think we're ready to go. So let's go ahead, head back out to the hayfield. We'll start plowing up all that grass and corn stalks. So I've got the new field all disced up now, and I did like an overlap as I was disking it. So I basically did a 6-foot overlap, so one side of the disc was actually disking or plowing a second time as the other side was plowing for the first time. So as I slowly worked across the field, it basically got disked twice. So this has basically been double plowed. And I'm pretty happy with the way I think this turned out for the first time. I know you can still see the grass and everything laying on top, and you can see all that green, but I think here in a couple days a lot of this is going to brown up. It's going to end up dying off because it just doesn't have anything good that the roots are connected to, and a lot of it's just chopped up so much that it isn't going to live. So here let's get a little bit closer and show you how it really looks close up. So as we look down here, most of this dirt is all just clods of dirt now. It's all broken up. You can see there's part of a corn cob. There's a lot of corn stalks. They're all chopped up. Most of this grass is just sitting here on top, pulled out of the dirt. See, some of it's still got a little bit of dirt clods on it. See, there's some that's got some dirt clods left on it. Here's a bigger one. But these clods will end up drying out, and these plants will die because they won't have enough moisture. With that just sitting on top like that, most of these are not going to be able to come back from this, and they'll end up dying. So I'll go ahead and address a few comments that people will probably say. So one of them is going to be, I should have went ahead and sprayed it. It would have been a lot less work. And they're right. If I would have sprayed this, I probably wouldn't have to plow it as many times. I probably wouldn't burn as much diesel fuel. It would take less time for sure. But that's just the decision I made. I decided to try to use less chemicals on our property, and we'll have to just see how this all turns out. I will have to disc it, several times to make sure that any of the seeds that are still left in the soil have time to germinate and start to grow so that I can disc them up again. So it will take a few times of doing this to get it to work, and we'll see how it turns out at the end. But I think I'm going to have pretty good luck with it. I also know somebody's going to say I probably should have mowed the field first before I disced it. But I didn't feel like the grass was so tall that it was going to strain the disc or the tractor too much. And I knew I was going to plow this so many times that it would all eventually just get chopped up as I disc it. So I'd opted not to try to mow the field down beforehand. And I think as many times as I'm going to plow it, it's going to be just fine. And you can see from the way this looks, it seemed to disc pretty good, even though the grass was probably, a foot to 2 foot tall in a lot of places. So I think plowing that field was actually a pretty good test for the tractor. That, in my mind, that just had to be probably one of the more difficult things to plow because it hasn't been plowed up in over a year, and then it basically was filled with grass, so it had like a sod that you were trying to break up. Plus this is clay soil. So I think that was a pretty good test for the tractor. It's got a little speed chart in there on the side, and it tells you like what speeds you should do for different tasks. And for plowing, it said for medium range gear 2 to medium range gear 4. And I started out actually in low, and I kind of worked my way up, but I ended up doing 80% of the field in medium range gear 3, and it seemed to do pretty good, and I think I'm pretty happy with the way everything performed today. So that disc ended up coming with our property when we purchased it. So the way the purchase agreement read was basically anything left on this property after a certain date was ours to keep or ours to deal with. And the majority of that ended up just being junk that was left here that needed hauled off to the junkyard. But this was left on the property, and it was still good. Everything was fine. It's still in the same condition. I haven't done anything to it as the way it was left here. And this disc has really worked out well for me. But, there's a couple of things that do need fixed on. Of course, the hydraulic hoses, which I mentioned earlier. And the discs on it, there's several that are broken. I just went back there and I counted them. There's a total of 7 discs that need replaced. 6 of those are on the back 2 axles. And you'll basically have to separate those axles, pull the shafts out, I think, to be able to put new discs in there. So that'll be a pretty big job. Probably something better tackled after this hayfield's planted. But yeah, that is the disc that came with the property. It's worked out fairly well. but I don't think it plowed as well as it should have if it had all good discs on there. So I'm going to let the field sit now for like a week, then I'm going to come back and disc it again. So when I come back, most of this grass that's green today, hopefully it's all brown next week. There'll probably still be a few pieces of green that survived that's still sticking up. And then, you know, we'll disc that up again. And then hopefully the next time when I come back, there's no green, right? Hopefully we've killed it off by then. But I will continue to disc the field probably every week for the next month. And then after that, we'll start really prepping it for the hayfield. We're going to have to fertilize it, and then we're going to have to get our seed planted. So shooting for like mid-August, somewhere in there, to plant our seed. That way, by the time it germinates, it'll be like the beginning of September, and then we're off to those cool months for the grass to grow and hopefully not compete with the warm season weeds that might sprout up. But that's the plan for our new hayfield back here. But that's it for today, guys. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.